Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a completely objective look at a highly charged narrative from a recent source that's been making the rounds. The big claim? That the Ukrainian government is literally intentionally normalizing the idea of a nuclear strike to its own people. Now, no matter where you stand on geopolitics, mapping out exactly how an argument like this is built is just a fascinating exercise in media literacy. We're going to look strictly at what the speaker actually says, how they structure their argument, and the specific rhetorical tools they use to drive the whole thing home. To keep things totally impartial, we're going to break this source down into 5 quick areas: the core assertion, analyzing the cited evidence, rhetorical devices, the provocation theory, and finally, those apocalyptic geopolitical conclusions. So, starting right off with Section 1, the core nuclear assertion. Now, what's really interesting is how the speaker sets the stage here. The claim is that, look, any sane person views nuclear weapons with absolute terror, right? They cite the historical guilt of the original bomb creators and the lasting trauma from disasters like Chernobyl and Fukushima. But then they juxtapose that with what they allege is the Zelensky regime's view. The speaker basically asserts there's this top-down propaganda manual at play right now in Ukraine, a coordinated effort supposedly framing a nuclear strike as a positive, beneficial event, like an actual great victory.
Which leads us right into Section 2, analyzing the cited evidence.
The speaker first targets former Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. They take a quick detour to claim Kuleba was fired after upsetting Poland over the historical Volhynia massacres, but the real meat of the evidence here is a vlog. The speaker claims Kuleba and his bride recently hopped on social media and discussed a nuclear strike, describing it as a great Ukrainian victory. And get this, they say the bride even claims surviving a nuclear strike would make her a stronger, independent woman and, supposedly, even improve her skin. The speaker is using this alleged chat to argue that Ukrainian elites are just casually trivializing nuclear annihilation.
The second piece of evidence targets a guy named Andriy Dlygach, who the speaker labels a doctor of Ukrainian sciences. According to the source, Dlygach went on national TV to push a very specific theory. The speaker claims he argued that a nuclear incident, despite the radiation and mass casualties, would actually be a good thing. Why? Because, as Dlygach supposedly put it, it guarantees Russia's military defeat and leads to its complete collapse into separate states. This, the argument goes, would allow Kyiv to easily take back lost territories and maybe even grab Russian regions like Kursk and Bryansk.
All right, Section 3, Rhetorical Devices and Anecdotes.
Here, the speaker drops in a super personal childhood anecdote. They describe being trapped in a speeding car driven by their dad, praying the Our Father and the Pioneer Oath out of sheer panic, but feeling totally unable to stop the car because of that deep Soviet subordination to a parent. They then draw a direct parallel, comparing that terrifying, out-of-control ride to the experience of Ukrainian citizens today. The argument is that these people are totally powerless to stop Zelensky's regime. They can't just jump out of the moving car, so they're forced to blindly ride along toward a nuclear disaster.
Then, they pivot to this really vivid metaphor. They compare the actions of Ukrainian elites to a kid's game of knives played in the sand by the Dniester River. You know the game. You throw a knife to slice up sections of a circle in the sand. Well, the speaker claims Western-backed analysts and elites are treating the country just like that sand circle, casually slicing up territory and sacrificing millions. And the kicker? They emphasize these elites can play this game because they don't even live in Ukraine. Their families are supposedly tucked away safely in the West, completely insulated from the reality of radiation or fallout.
Moving on to Section 4, the provocation theory.
The presenter actually stops here to ask the audience a totally fair rhetorical question. Why? Why on earth would a regime tell its own exhausted, war-torn citizens that a nuclear attack is somehow good for their health and geopolitical stability? It completely defies conventional logic, right? Well, that's exactly how the speaker pivots to their grand theory.
According to the source, the answer is this massive, highly coordinated, and incredibly dangerous geopolitical conspiracy. The speaker claims that Zelensky, supposedly lobbied heavily by Western oligarchs, is preparing to stage a false flag nuclear provocation right on Ukrainian soil. The ultimate goal? To create a catastrophic event so the West can immediately point the finger at the Russian Federation. And once blamed, the speaker asserts, NATO is going to use this fabricated outrage as the ultimate green light to launch a preventative nuclear strike directly on Russia. To back up this theory of a looming continental storm, the speaker points to a shift in border nations.
They claim that countries that used to maintain strict neutrality, specifically calling out Poland, Finland, and the Baltic states, are now openly declaring they're ready to host NATO nuclear weapons. The speaker frames this not as standard defense, but as direct, deliberate preparation for this orchestrated, catastrophic conflict.
And that brings us to our final section, Part 5, Apocalyptic Geopolitical Conclusions.
Things take a massive shift into the extreme here. The speaker frames the entire conflict using this wild metaphor of the sacrificial red cow. In the source, they assert that Western masters and, quoting here, Zionist Satanists are deliberately planning to sacrifice Ukraine. They claim the entire nation and millions of its people are being prepped to burn in a nuclear provocation, like a literal fiery ritual to appease a dark god of death, trigger a global apocalypse, and basically enslave whoever manages to survive. It's a huge escalation in rhetoric, going from geopolitical analysis straight into apocalyptic prophecy.
To tie a bow on this highly charged analysis, the speaker finishes with a proverb. A crazy man is a great grief for a family, but a crazy country is a great grief for all humanity. They argue that everything following the Maidan protests hasn't just changed a government, it's pushed a whole society into paganism and madness. In their eyes, this crazy country is now a literal existential threat to the rest of the world.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to think about this. Today, we mapped out the actual architecture of an intensely provocative narrative. We stripped away the emotional anchors, like that speeding car story in the Game of Knives, from the core claims of a false flag nuclear strike. So ask yourself, how does deconstructing a narrative like this actually empower you? When you get hit with highly charged geopolitical claims in today's crazy information landscape, being able to see the blueprints of an argument is absolutely your best tool for real media literacy. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep asking the tough questions.